What's happening, y'all? Been working on my truck here, 1990 Chevrolet K1500, and been getting a lot of experience with the instrument cluster here. You know, I bought this truck used a few months ago, and it had a few little problems here and there that the previous owner left unfinished. So I have learned quite a bit about this instrument cluster, and it is in some ways, you know, sort of ahead of its time, because all the gauges are individually mounted on this circuit board that's down there. I'll show you a video of that in a minute. And so that's a good thing, because if you have a failure with any of these gauges, you can replace them individually on the circuit board. So that's a good thing. But other things, though, if you have a problem with the circuit board, mine was unknowingly cracked. So it was unable to get seated properly as far as the connector that's in the very back of the board. I'll show you that on the actual item that I have the spare inside. I'll show you that. But I didn't know this at the time, but the plastic had gotten so brittle of the circuit board itself that it was cracking on some of the mounting points. So not good. And I didn't know this, but you know, I was doing some driving around, noticed the speedometer started getting all funky. It was cutting in and out. Odometer would quit working, you know, but they were intermittent. And then I saw in the lower right hand corner the brake light, this guy down here, the brake warning light started flashing while I was driving down the road. And I'm going, oh boy, what does that mean? Because it could mean anything. You know, it could mean anti-lock brake issue. It could just mean some sort of fault in the braking system. However, that was not the case. What was the case is because my instrument cluster was damaged on the circuit board, and it was unable to get seated properly in that connector in the back of it. It was causing the speedometer to flake out, which was it was confusing the computer of the truck, making it think there was an ABS issue. Which, yeah, wow, you know, how would you know what to start searching for? So if you have a problem where you're seeing your brake lamp flashing down here, but you can't figure out what is wrong, and you've checked, you know, everything normal, or everything that you would think would be the problem, pull your instrument cluster out and see if there's any damage to the circuit board itself. You know, just take a look back there. You might be surprised that you have some damage, because that board is made of plastic that gets very brittle over time, and you just can't tighten it down as well anymore, or you over tightened it and you cracked several of the mounts, and you know, it messed it up. So it's very easy to get to that circuit, or to get to the instrument cluster. You know, the bezel comes right out with a few screws, and it's all very self-explanatory as far as the screws relating. You know, you got bring the shifter arm down so that you can lift everything out of there, unplug the headlight switches, but very easy to get to it. And if you've got some broken mounting points for your instrument cluster, that very well may be the cause of why you're getting a flashing brake lamp error. It could blow your mind, really, or really frustrate you. Luckily, I was suspect of that to begin with, so that was immediately what I looked at, and thank goodness that was the problem, because I replaced the board and that whole frame with with a new or used setup, and that solved that problem, thank goodness. I'll show you what the board looks like upstairs. Hold on. All right, here is what your instrument cluster looks like, and this is from 1988. and up, I believe up to, well, this specific one is 88 to 91, but the frame underneath, I believe, is the same all the way up to 94. And I'll show you a few things about it here. Now with this gauge cluster, as you can see, it is in a little box basically. Each gauge is individual. So that's kind of a good thing because you can replace them individually if you have a problem. I actually did my oil pressure gauge, even though I replaced the switch inside the engine compartment, the gauge itself was reading lower than it should because I knew what my oil pressure should be, and the gauge was a good bit lower. So I was getting a check gauges error, which I guess is kind of good because I had already purchased a spare gauge cluster, so they give me parts to swap out and experiment with and all that, thank goodness. So I swapped out this gauge and now it works perfectly. My battery gauge as well was reading incorrectly. You know, it was reading way up, almost to the way past 15. You know, it was like way up here, and I knew that was incorrect as well. So I swapped that gauge, and now it's reading properly. Anyway, the good stuff is, and it's all basic as far as screws. You know, you got little screws that mount everything in place. It's very self-explanatory of how to get into everything. So you just remove everything. The problem, though, with this plastic, see how they just pop out easily? However, the problem, this plastic is old. Like this is from about a 1989, I believe. So you're talking a long time, you know, 28, 29 years. The plastic starts getting brittle. Got cracks in it. These little mounting tabs start breaking. You'd think someone, you know, cranked down on these screws with an impact wrench, but that wasn't the case at all. The stuff is just getting brittle. So all this stuff had cracked, broken, which also meant the connector on the back. This is what fastens, you know, to the wiring harness behind the dash. But because all these tabs were cracking and breaking, it couldn't get a good firm seating on the wiring harness. So this was probably a little bit loose, and that made the speedometer go ape. That made the brake warning light start flashing, even though I knew I didn't have a brake issue specifically. The ABS system was getting triggered from this speed system and confusing the entire computer. Anyway, my whole point is, if you have a brake lamp flashing error and you can't figure out what the problem is, have a look at your gauge cluster, because you never know if you've got broken mounting points and that sort of thing. You very well might have found your problem. And you can buy these entire gauge clusters on eBay all day long. You know, it depends. If you keep searching, you find a good price. But that was my problem. Broken frame. Completely broken frame. You'd think it wouldn't have been related at all, and it was. So anywho, we'll keep doing more videos on this truck, you know, learning all kinds of new stuff about it. And good running truck. It's just old, you know, approaching 30 years old, so things start breaking and wearing out and whatnot. So that's all right. It's cheap and easy to work on. Parts are easy to get as well, so that's a good thing. Anywho, like, subscribe, follow. Check us out on Facebook. We got links all over the place. Always doing some kind of help videos and stuff like that. So y'all have a good day. See ya.